In this episode of Watching the Watchers, a segment that we do to monitor police misconduct, judicial misconduct, political maneuvering, anything that's happening in the criminal justice system, we're talking about qualified immunity. And we're talking about a case that happened that's now in federal court. What happened was two individuals were under investigation by the police in California. Police executed a search warrant, which means they got permission from a court to go into their house. They did that. What ended up happening is the police seized $150,000 in cash and $125,000 in rare coins. So the police are now in possession of this very valuable cash and these very valuable coins. They take it, they impound it into evidence, and the people who were under investigation were never actually charged with crimes. So they seized all of that material but didn't charge them with violating the law. So when they went to go back and actually retrieve their property, they found that unfortunately only $50,000 had been placed into evidence. Where did the other money go? Where did the coins go? Where did the cash go? Who knows? But it probably ended up in the pockets of the three officers who conducted the search warrant, who executed that search warrant. So what ended up happening is the people who had their property stolen from them filed a civil lawsuit against those police officers. You're allowed to sue the police, you're allowed to sue the government. But there's a concept, it's called qualified immunity. This means that federal officials, law enforcement, politicians, basically anybody who works for the government is immune from certain cases, from certain liability, so long as certain rules are met. And so the people who brought, the victims in this case, the people who had their property stolen, filed lawsuit against those officers. It went into federal court to say, we want our property back. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars in this case. And in the lawsuit, the case went up to a federal circuit court of appeals, and the circuit court judge, Judge Milan D. Smith, wrote that because the officers had a warrant to justify the seizure of the property, it was not clearly established whether the theft had violated the Fourth Amendment. So the Fourth Amendment says that you're protected against unreasonable searches and seizures. This is something that was very important to our founders. It made it into the Bill of Rights in our Constitution, and you're protected against the police or law enforcement searching you in an unreasonable manner or seizing your property in an unreasonable manner. But the judge, Judge Smith, said that the lack of any cases or controlling authority says that the conclusion is it's not clearly established that at the time of the incident that there was any wrongdoing here. So in other words, the police did not have clear notice based on the case law, based on what we've seen in the court cases, the court system. There's nothing there that gave the police clear notice that they violated the Fourth Amendment, is what Smith said, Judge Smith. So they recognize, of course, the judge goes on to say, I recognize that there is, this is deeply disturbing, but it says that the prohibition on reasonable searches and seizures that you find in the Fourth Amendment would not be clear to a reasonable officer. So it's not clear to a reasonable officer that the theft of $225,000 would be unreasonable. In other words, it's not a violation of the Fourth Amendment. An officer wouldn't know that it's wrong to take $225,000 or whatever the difference is that they took, which is kind of insane to me. I don't know if it makes sense to you. The circuit judge obviously found that it was something worth an argument to say that now qualified immunity applies to those officers. They didn't have clear notice. They didn't know that it would be wrong to do that based on the case law, based on the controlling authority in this jurisdiction. And so they're immune from that lawsuit. You cannot sue these officers. And so this judge dismissed that case. Now, what we found out later in this article, this is a great article, by the way, by Jerry Lambe, Lambe, written on September 7th, 2019. In the article, he goes on to say that one of the officers who was involved in this, so one of the officers who actually helped conduct that warrant, execute that warrant, and then was probably responsible for the missing money, says that in 2013, One of the officers was federally indicted in 2014 for accepting a $20,000 bribe from a suspected drug trafficker. He pled guilty to conspiring to commit bribery, and he was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison. So we've got some bad actors here, some bad police officers. This is actually going to end up going very likely to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is in Arizona's district. When you have federal cases, they work their way up. They go into different federal district courts, so this will go up to the Ninth Circuit. And we'll see what happens there. It seems pretty clear to me that stealing is unreasonable. That's kind of what the whole point of the Fourth Amendment was, to be free from unreasonable searches, unreasonable seizures, outright theft of somebody's property. It was executed under a warrant, no question about it, but for that not to go into evidence and then be returned when there was no evidence of wrongdoing, no charges, no criminal filing of charges, then that all of that should go back. And so where'd this money go? Who knows? According to this judge, it's gone, and there's no recourse against those officers. You can go ahead and file a lawsuit against them, and the courts will just go ahead and dismiss them. They'll say officers are qualified, they're immune, they're not allowed to be held liable for that type of conduct. We'll see where it goes. We'll follow it along. Again, another shout out to the author of this article, Jerry Lambe, Lambe, for doing the great work that they do, monitoring these types of cases, and allowing us to share these stories with you, to hold our officials, our police officers, our judges, anybody involved in the system accountable. If you like what you hear here, if you want to hear more about what we're doing to Watch the Watchers, hit the subscribe button. If you have any tips, shoot them over to me on Twitter. My handle's at Robert Gruler ESQ. That's for Esquire, Robert Gruler ESQ. I love when I get tips from people. It allows me to hop on here, share my thoughts with you, share these stories in a different format that's not written. I can actually speak with you about it. If you have any questions or comments, leave a comment below. Hit subscribe so we can bring you the next one. Until then, thanks for watching.